The British Empire, at its height, was the largest empire in history. Stretching across every continent, it was said that the sun never set on the British Empire. But as the 20th century dawned, the empire began to shrink, and with it, Britain's influence on the world stage. In this video, we'll explore the dramatic story of the shrinkage of the British Empire. For centuries, Britain's empire had been built on the backs of slaves and colonized peoples. But as the world began to change, so too did the empire. In the late 1800s, Britain lost control of its American colonies, and by the early 1900s, the winds of change were blowing across the globe. The First World War was a turning point for the British Empire. Millions of soldiers from across the empire fought and died for Britain, but the cost of the war was staggering. By the end of the war, Britain was bankrupt and deeply in debt to the United States. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, marked the end of the war and the beginning of a new era for the British Empire. The treaty imposed heavy reparations on Germany, but it also sowed the seeds of resentment and anger that would lead to the Second World War. In the years between the wars, Britain struggled to maintain its grip on its vast empire. The Great Depression and the rise of fascism in Europe shook the foundations of the empire, and many of Britain's colonies began to push for independence. India was the jewel in the crown of the British Empire, but by the 1930s, the Indian independence movement was gaining momentum. Led by Mahatma Gandhi, millions of Indians began to demand their freedom from British rule. The Second World War was a turning point for the British Empire. Millions of soldiers across the empire fought and died for Britain, but the cost of the war was even higher than the First World War. By the end of the war, Britain was bankrupt and exhausted, and its grip on its empire was slipping. In the years after the war, Britain's empire began to shrink at an alarming rate. One by one, its colonies gained their independence, and by the 1960s, the British Empire had all but disappeared. Britain was left a shadow of its former self, struggling to come to terms with its diminished place in the world. Today, Britain is still grappling with the legacy of its empire. The Brexit referendum, and the rising tide of nationalism and populism across the globe, are a testament to the enduring impact of Britain's imperial past.